Hey everybody, this is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome back to the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. We have a fantastic episode for you today. I spoke with Adrian Mendes. He is the CEO of Perimeter Medical Imaging AI. Perimeter Medical has a product on the market currently that uses OCT to analyze tissue that's been removed to determine whether all the cancer has been removed. So its current system just uses OCT. Perimeter's working on a next generation that's going to incorporate AI, and we'll talk about that. Perimeter had some really encouraging news that they released recently. We'll cover that, and we'll talk about their plans with the FDA in the future. So I really enjoyed my conversation with CEO Adrian Mendes, and Perimeter Medical is a sponsor of this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. So we'd like to thank them for that. Before I speak with Adrian Mendes, we'll have the one and only Paul Grand of the MedTech Innovator in the house. He'll be talking about the deadline that's coming up. If you are a senior executive of a MedTech company that wants to be part of the MedTech Innovator and receive the help that they're able to provide, make sure you listen to this podcast. And of course, apply to join the program. You can go to, well, I want you to listen to the podcast, but I'll give you a hint. Go to medtechinnovator.org and you can find out more about applying there. The deadline for that is January 15th, technically, but the sooner you get your material in, the better. Other than that, let's see. We are done with Device Talks Tuesdays for the year. We'll have one more Device Talks Weekly, a very special Device Talks Weekly next week, and that'll be our final one of 2024. We'll be back on January 3rd. Of course, registration is open for Device Talks Boston. That's happening April 30th and May 1st. And registration is opening for Device Talks Minnesota. We're excited to be back in Minnesota. That'll be January 11th at the McNamara Alumni Center. And it's going to be a different type of Device Talks event. So really, though, excited to be back in the Minnesota market. I've missed it so. And I'm really excited about the program that we're building there. So lots going on, but that's it for now. Now let's just roll into this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. Let's go. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well. Man, you look a little different.
So we were having our pre-call conversation about whether we should talk about my lack of a beard on a podcast, and Chris is going right for it.
I mean,
right for it.
Let's just do it. Yeah.
I woke up. I was contemplating it for a few days. Woke up on Monday and said, you know what, I'm going to shave this off. And I went downstairs, and the first words my beloved shared were, "Ooh, no!" So the beard's coming back.
All right.
She can't even look at me. Literally,
I
she just avert her eyes.
I think it's kind of part of your brand now. I mean, you gotta keep it going. And I mean,
I've had it for 12, 13 years. Yeah. So it certainly is. Certainly in the social media era of LinkedIn and such, I've always been bearded. So
I just noticed in the news like Prince William has a beard. It's if the Royals are doing it, you gotta keep it going, right?
Speaking of royals, we have royalty with us, Chris Newmarker, don't we?
My gosh. Can I do a Wayne and Garth? Like, we're not worthy. This is,
We have the one and only Paul Grand, CEO of MedTech Innovator. Paul, welcome back to the podcast.
Welcome back, Paul.
Hey, guys. Great to be here. I was dying to figure out who this royalty was going to be. I thought there was somebody else who must be in the green room that I just didn't have access to.
Come on, Paul.
now we have the King of Norway waiting.
Exactly. I'm like, I've been upstaged again. They got the King of Norway. They've got Dr. Oz is on to talk about Medicare.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that would be a good get. Okay, we'll do the Jimmy Kimmel, Matt Damon joke. Oh, sorry, Paul. We ran out of time. We'll have you on next time.
It's all right. I'm always fine to take a backstage when needed. That's fine. Back seat. I'm sorry. Yes, indeed. But it's great to be here.
So while Santa's elves are busy this time of year, are the MedTech Innovator elves, are they slowing? Are they resting this time of year? Are you in between crazy, or is it 24/12/7 going on at MedTech Innovator? Is it always crazy?
It is always crazy. That's the secret. This is like the Avengers when Iron Man says "suit up" to Dr. Banner, and he says it's time to get angry, and he goes, "The secret is I'm always angry." This is I'm always angry. The secret is we're always MedTech Innovator is always doing what we're doing. There is no break. There's no gap in there where we're just sitting around going, okay, let's just rest on our laurels for the year. We're running 24/7. We really are. So we're in that amazing cycle where we literally just finished like 3 weeks ago, and already have something like, I don't even know what it is now. It's like 500 or 600 applications for next year already. So we're well on the way.
Well, we're here to talk about applications. You're going to be joining us for the Newsmakers in just a moment. But folks, there's a deadline coming up, a MedTech Innovator deadline. Paul, what is the deadline, and what do people need to know about?
Just very briefly. So MedTech Innovator is an accelerator for MedTech companies as it relates to this podcast. We also do biotools and life science tools, but in particular, the MedTech, medical devices, diagnostics, digital health technologies. We're looking for the companies that are far along on the path, meaning that they're not in a lab anymore somewhere with a science project. Now they're on the way to commercialization. They got a team, a prototype, evidence that this might work. And we want you to avoid the 100 mistakes you're going to make on the way to getting to market. So that's what we're all about. We have mentorship from some of the leading strategics in the industry, the companies like J&J or Edwards Life Sciences and others. And the whole idea is that we want to make sure your products not only reach the market, but with the value that they can be purchased and reimbursed and all those important things so you can be successful. So it's like help us help you kind of thing. We're looking for all the great companies all over the world that really that are doing something incredibly important. I know everybody thinks they are, but if you're working on something that's super important for the future of medical technology, we want to know about you. And so that's what this application period is about. It's the application season where companies apply to MedTech Innovator. It's a 2-month window that started in November and closes January 15th. So you got about a month. And the amazing thing is, not only applying to MedTech Innovator isn't just applying to some program that's going to provide you with mentorship or resources or potentially, funding and other things, but it also gives you a path to being at DeviceTalks. Many of the listeners out there have heard about the great sequence of events we've been having together, where we feature some of the largest and most exciting emerging medical technology innovations at your conference now each year, and the only way to get in there is by getting into MedTech Innovator in the first place. So
there you go.
It's a path to many, many things. It's a path to success. And I don't mean that, to brag. I'm just saying that the data is the data, and about 96% of the companies who've graduated MedTech Innovator are still in business or have been acquired. We just hit 50 acquisitions. And so, it's just like the data speaks for itself. We've had 12,000 applicants over the years, and the companies that have graduated are bringing the majority of all the new medical innovation to market is coming through us. So anyways, that's where we are.
So describe the ideal candidate to apply. Our listeners are listening and they're saying, I wonder if I would qualify to be part of the MedTech Innovator
What stage
program.
do they have to be in their development?
So we're looking for people who have a team. So you have to at least have some full-time people on your team. If you're a clinician and you're a full-time clinician and you're also on the side starting a medical device company and you don't have anyone besides you, it's going to be tough to get into MedTech Innovator. It's not impossible. We've done this once or twice, but usually you have a full-time team who's only focused on this. So you want to check that box. You want to have at least a prototype, if not later. Maybe you're clinical already. but at least a prototype of your technology and some evidence that it's going to work. That evidence is probably your own evidence. Could be benchtop, could be preclinical, but could be clinical, could be cadaver, whatever it might be. But something that indicates that what you're doing is actually going to work. So you're beyond the science project stage. And
if
at
they
that
come
point,
to you and say, I've got a head transplanting robot, you're like, a schematic of it, you're like, all right, go get that prototyped and see if it works. And we'll talk to you later.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go work with, one of the other idea stage accelerators, and there's a lot of those. I mean, that's what like a Y Combinator is. That's what a lot of these earlier programs are. Most of the university associated accelerators, those things are more for people who have ideas and they say, how do I start a company? That is not MedTech Innovator. You're already a company if you're coming to us, and you probably have some amount of funding, whether it's grant or equity already. But as I said, you still have 100 mistakes ahead of you that you could make, and our job is to help you avoid those. That's the criteria we're looking for. If you've raised a series, seed round or an A round or a B round, you're eligible. None of these things are exclusion criteria. We have people all the time. We're like, oh, I've already raised my A round. I don't need an accelerator. And we're like, boy, do you need an accelerator if that's what you think, because there are so many ways in which you're still going to make mistakes. It has nothing to do with the fact that you have a little bit of money, even if you have a lot of money. We've had companies with $100 million go through MedTech Innovator, and benefit significantly from it.
You mentioned the number of applications you've already received. What's your typical number? What was last year's number, and what is the number of applicants accepted?
So last year we had in our U.S. market program. So we have 3 different cohorts. One is the U.S. market focused program that can be for any company anywhere in the world whose main primary target is the U.S. market. We had 1,300 companies apply last year for that program, and we accepted 65. So we operate pretty much on just about a 5% acceptance rate, and that's been pretty consistent for our history.
If I were to slip a link for a $5 gift card to Starbucks into my application, would that improve my chances of getting accepted?
That would not improve your chances at all. We cannot be bought.
What about $25 at Olive Garden? I mean, that bottomless salad. I mean,
is there still an Olive Garden? The one that was here in Westwood is long gone.
Oh man,
no, there's no. We say this all the time, and I'm not kidding. We cannot be bought. It is entirely merit based. Okay. That is one of the cornerstones that defines us. Is that it is merit based. You do not get into MedTech Innovator without not only the support of the people who evaluate. We have like 500 people who evaluate the startups from across the industry in many different places. And we also have our strategics. I mentioned before some of them. There's also companies like Dexcom and others. They're all they all have specific expertise who are in our program. We have 25 corporate partners, and they will evaluate the companies that they think are really the products that eventually either they or one of their competitors are going to be acquiring, and so we're all using that benchmark. If you don't have a strategic who's going to mentor you in MedTech Innovator, you don't get in. So again, no one's buying their way in. Everyone who's in MedTech Innovator has had support of literally sometimes as many as 70 people who have kind of effectively voted that company in one way or another.
Though I suspect they would get vibes of appreciation from you if they get their applications in early versus like piling in at the up to the deadline crunch time.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
Chris. So that So one of the things that is not always well understood is that the way our process works is we start with this online review period. So, applications are already being reviewed. They just started here in December. So people who, even though we say the deadline is January 15th, there are people who've already applied. And those people are getting reviewed. And we have a road tour in which we'll invite, last year it was 13% of the applicants got invited to pitch. It'll probably be about the same this year, maybe less, depending on how big that pool is. But the point is, we'll invite companies to pitch us in person at a series of events where we literally bring about 150 evaluators from all of our partners. We'll have investors there. We'll have clinicians. We'll have everybody you could want to meet. We'll have healthcare providers, insurers. It's really an unbelievable thing, the Road Tour, in terms of an opportunity for the startups. Even if they don't get accepted, they get all sorts of feedback and make connections. It's really amazing. A lot of the people who participate come up to me afterward and go, I don't care if I get accepted or not. This was the best day ever.
Fantastic.
And I'm not exaggerating like that. I hear that pretty regularly. And so applying early increases your chances of getting slotted into those pitch events.
Fantastic.
It's the way it works. So, we're starting to slot people in already. One other thing I'll mention is that we have something we started 3 years ago, but have now formalized, is what we call our specialty track program. And what that means is we have specialty tracks in either a disease area or an area of medicine in general. So we have our longest running one of those is with the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, ASPS, where we're looking for plastic surgery innovation. And it's not all dermal fillers. There's more than that. There's a lot of really, really incredible innovation that's just general surgery. So they will be choosing and mentoring 5 companies that are related to plastic surgery. We had one of them from the plastic surgery cohort just won our mid-stage finals competition, a company called Lattice Medical that has a technology for breast reconstruction that's just incredible, a resorbable technology for breast that is just is really I think a really disruptive innovation, very exciting. Then we have the American Heart Association has a cohort of companies that will be selected for them. And they'll be providing KOLs and support for those companies and resources at the American Heart Association. And we also have one for military technology we do with MedTech, which is, again, focused on technologies for the battlefield or for people who've already come home and are, and maybe at the VA or somewhere else. Those partners and those specialty track programs, they get to each choose a cohort of companies. So there's lots of way in, but again, you can't be bought.
And it all stems from you need to apply, and you need to do so before. What's the date, and where can they apply?
January 15th is the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, some of those specialty track partners are only going to be at one event. So, like, for example, if we have the March event here in Los Angeles, and that might be where American Heart is. I'm just making that up right now. I'm not sure where they're going to be this year, but let's say that's going to be their destination. They're going to start reviewing companies sooner. They're going to want to be picking companies for March as soon as possible. So apply early. And where do you apply? You apply at medtechinnovator.org. So www.medtechinnovator.org or just innovator.org will get you there. If you want to be really fancy, you could go to medtechinnovator.org/apply, and that'll take you right there to the application page. But you could start at the homepage, and that will get you on your path to application.
And just to I think this is a good transition here because, when I look at our Newmarkers Newsmakers today,
Wow.
I actually see companies that, are raising money that, have some really cool goals to improve people's health and lives. So, are you ready? Let's get into this.
Like Bob Cousy of the podcast just didn't even see that.
What a seamless transition was amazing.
It's kind of wow, this is awesome. We're flying red altitude. Let's go. Number 5 on the list. We've got Capstan Medical. They just raised $110 million in an oversubscribed Series C round, and
I know.
Yeah,
No, and that, by the way, that's fantastic. And just I was just going to say, just the funding environment has been really difficult.
Yeah.
The biggest difficulty has been the Series B round. The Series A and kind of seed rounds are still closing. The Series C rounds are closing. The Series B rounds are really struggling. But let's stick on Capstan. I want to take the news away from them. Tell us more, Chris.
Oh my gosh! I mean, they is structural heart surgical robot developer. So I mean, you're talking about like catheter delivered heart implants with robotic features. I mean, that's.
Yeah, Jim Hammerin wrote the startup hopes to conduct its first in-human mitral valve procedure by early next year. So that'd be a couple of months, and to follow the same for tricuspid valve sometime in 2025. So it'll be later next year. So they're making some real progress. I'm excited about this. I've been kind of talking with Maggie Nixon, the CEO, for a few months. They've been rather stealthy, but now that they have their funding out, we're hoping to help them tell their story a bit. And it's just exciting to see surgical robotics move into all these specialties. We're seeing a lot of endovascular robots making progress. We're seeing now Capstan getting this big round. So great news for MedTech and for surgical robotics. So great number
great
5.
News. And great news for, or maybe I should say, consistent news in terms of who's funding these companies. So it's a mix of more institutional investors, and then you see Intuitive Ventures in that deal. The people who are going to most likely partner with these companies. More and more, you're seeing corporate venture capital in these deals.
It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
That's
I know
awesome
I know all my non-structural heart companies or non-neurovascular companies are jealous of a lot of these structural heart companies. It's definitely one of the hotter categories.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, Chris Newmarker, what's number 4 on this vaunted award-winning
number 4,
list?
Cala Health. So Cala Health is next on the list, and they had a $50 million growth financing round.
So, I've been following that company since its inception. This company is, it's one of those amazing stories where, a company can live or die based on Medicare coverage. We've seen that, happen in, companies like iRhythm, right? Where depending on, coverage and reimbursement, companies can just take a complete hit or thrive. And in this particular case, they had a good positive determination from Medicare on that therapy that they do for essential tremor.
Yeah.
And so that changes everything in terms of funding, because the investors who are out there are not worried anymore. I shouldn't say not worried at all, but less worried about regulatory risk. They're worried about reimbursement. Mm-hmm. So seeing coverage in a positive way makes all the difference, and I'm sure that was a big part of the confidence for this particular technology, that the therapy works. Yeah. So then it's just a question of, will people pay for it?
And, for now, their device for now is the Cala. Their Cala, let me see if I have it correctly. The KIQ wearable. I mean, this is like a wrist-worn wearable to counteract tremor, treat essential tremor. But I mean, there's so much talk right now about kind of the potential of neuromodulation, neurostimulation, electronic medicine to treat all these different conditions. I mean,
no. I mean, this is we're talking about technologies that again totally sound like science fiction when you think about it. But that company I just mentioned, CardiaCare, the data is pretty strong. The data is very compelling. It's still they still have a ways to go, but the data looks like they'll be able to treat AFib at your wrist. That's crazy. That's amazing. So I think the amount of stuff we're seeing that sounds like science fiction. Technologies to access your brain without having to open your skull anymore. It's the stuff that we saw Spock doing in Star Trek. Almost. I mean, that's literally pretty much where we are with a lot of these companies now. The line is blurring. We have companies in MedTech Innovator who have those little robots that are going to swim through your brain and deliver leads and things without what's it called, the Fantastic Voyage or Journey or whatever it was called all those years ago. This stuff is it's real now. Yeah. We actually have this stuff.
And to Paul's earlier point about investors, and I think it just shows the the impact of the reimbursement, they're receiving reimbursement, because there was a hiccup with the reimbursement a while ago, which created a bit of a bump for Cala, but now they have the reimbursement, and their investors include Vertex Growth Fund, Nexus Neurotech Ventures, and then they have a lot of existing investors: Action Potential, J&J, Lightstone, Lux, Google Ventures, Ascension Ventures, Tri Ventures. But the fact that you got a Vertex in there, they just, to me, they feel like mezzanine investors. Maybe there's an IPO, which I know is a bit of foreshadowing for an upcoming Newmarker, but there's a lot of momentum behind this company. And Chris, I want to point out, and I don't think this was intentional, but I think we should shout it out. Maggie Nixon was the CEO of our number 5 company, and Deanna Harshberger, who was on this podcast a few years ago, she's CEO of Cala. So two vibrant, growing medtech companies with women as CEOs. It's super exciting to point out.
Yeah, definitely. That's just really good news. So it's awesome to see that. My gosh. So number 3 on the list, this is from our senior editor, Daniel Kirsch. We have an IPO. We have an IPO in the works with MedTech. So there we go. So, I mean, Anteris Technologies, they've got the IPO is to advance the development of their, see if I can, AVR transcatheter heart valve technology. So this is great news. I mean, there's been a real dearth of medtech IPOs for sure. So to see something like this happening, and again in that structural heart space, that's just like super super hot right now. But
just in general, as we said, structural heart valve. This particular space is just, I would say one of the hottest areas. So this particular company, right, they're going after aortic stenosis. It is just, there's no question to me, I said this before, and I'll say it again, the best way to impact human health is through these medical technologies like transcatheter aortic valve replacements. And this whole area, this is the best way. It's not, biopharma is it's got some benefit. Believe me, I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think it's unfairly outsized in terms of how well people are funding and rewarding the companies in the biopharma space, when I believe it's these companies like Anteris, are going to make an outsized impact in a way that we can really measure. And it's not as, ambiguous about like, well, the data seems to indicate that maybe taking Ozempic somehow lowers your risk of heart disease. Does it really? Right. I don't know. But this, you can directly measure what these valves are going to do in the body.
So Anteris is based in Australia. They've launched the IPO roadshow. They haven't priced yet, but certainly they'll be bolstered, I'm sure, by the acquisitions that Edwards made earlier this year of those other structural heart companies. I think they paid over $1 billion, $1.4 billion or something like that for those companies. So yeah, this is a space that's definitely getting attention from everyone, and should. All right, Chris Newmarker, we should roll on to number 2.
Let's keep on rolling. Number 4 on the list. This is from Associated. Sorry, you're right. Yes. Wow. Number 2 on the list. This is from Associate Editor Sean Hooley, but we've got he's writing about a report from Bank of America in which analysts are predicting that we're going to, see a rise in M&A activity in MedTech next year. I mean, even more than, what we saw this year. And we had some major notable deals this year, like J&J spending $13 billion on Shockwave Medical, BD, spending $4.2 billion on Edwards Critical Care business, Boston Scientific, $3.7 billion for Exonics. But they're saying that, we're look out for even more runway with companies like Boston Scientific and Johnson & Johnson, doing even more acquisitions over the next 12 months.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not just companies like J&J and Boston Scientific that are acquiring companies. We had one of our companies in our Asia Pacific program, same thing though, medical devices, diagnostic, digital health, was just acquired, a company called VinBrain, VIN Brain, by NVIDIA.
Oh, really? Wow.
By NVIDIA. So, that is one of those things where you're like, that's pretty interesting.
That is really interesting.
So, when this is a company and that AI brains in the AI area of improving the quality of care using AI, helping radiologists detect disease and abnormalities and all that kind of stuff. But it's great. You see NVIDIA come in and they want to play in the space. So
that's
they
the
just acquired it.
first time I've heard their name. Wow, that's an interesting one.
I do think you're going to continue. We've seen private equity firms acquiring medtech companies. It's not just the big traditional manufacturers who are doing this. We're going to see more of that. But it was a great year. It's shaping up to. I shouldn't say great year. The number of M&A deals were less than I think we all would have hoped this year, but it seems to be speeding up. We had Endotronics get bought by Edwards. We've had a number of other ones in our portfolio in particular. But it's really been it's starting to heat up.
It does honestly feel like we're heading into next year. Like things are going to finally pick up for people, and that's just good news. And then just to let's head on to number one, which is I've got a whole roundup of the top medtech stories of 2024 on MassDevice. So we're going to be doing a more extensive conversation about that next week with much of our team. But just to tease it a little bit, we've been talking about structural heart a lot. It's been a big year for pulse field ablation. So, but Paul, when you're looking back on the last year, what's the biggest thing that really sticks out to you?
Well, I don't know if it's fair to say this is the biggest thing, but I do know something that I think is certainly on everyone's mind, and if it's not, it sure should be. Is the IPO market, because it is this pull, right? It is the IPO exit, if you want to call that, as being one of the big drivers of the food chain. If we say that's at the top, that and other exits, I guess. But the IPO market is the driver that without an IPO market, it just everything below it trickles down, and it really does trickle down. I know in the past people said, "Oh, it doesn't affect me, the stock market. That's we're just this little seed round company. Who cares?" It affects you. Trust me. The venture funds that are funding companies like you entirely are driven by exits, and if there's if there isn't an IPO market, it just kills everything going down below. So I think the Ceribell IPO continues to be one of the biggest stories of the year, from my perspective. That they had an IPO, and that it continues to perform pretty well. I think, to me, that's a really good point. I think that's one of the top stories of the year for sure.
All right. Great rundown. Kind of meta having your final newsmaker be an article about newsmakers. So I feel like we're
the newsmaker about newsmaker. There you go.
The newsmaker about newsmaker. Well, we know the news. The Newmarker's Newsmakers is absolutely is a trendsetter. What happens in your thing does affect. We read that and we're like, oh, let's figure out how do we get on that list. So you're the driver.
Chris and I always give 110% combined. So together, if you put our efforts together, it adds up to 110%. Right, Chris?
There you go. Wait a second. I'm doing the math in my head. I'm like, wait, Tom, wait. Isn't it 220%? It's 220%.
That's right. It would be 220%. Yeah, I shouldn't have taken that. Yes. Combined 220%, Chris, Newmarker, and I. All right. Well, so once again, folks, if you want to apply to be part of MedTech Innovator, go to medtechinnovator.org/apply and do it before. Do it now. Don't wait. The deadline's...
Do it now.
We won't even say when the deadline is. January, as Chris said, January 10th.
January 10th, everybody.
Yeah. But and don't miss out. It's a great program, and of course you'll be in line to speak at a future Device Talks Boston when you're a MedTech Innovator All-Star. We're looking forward to having the All-Stars back at Device Talks Boston on April 30th and May 1st. Paul Grand.
The All-Stars are looking forward to being back.
Yes,
the All-Stars, and you're the one who coined the All-Stars. That was your name. You get the credit for that, Tom.
I get a penny every time I say it, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Every time a company puts on their LinkedIn profile that they're a MedTech Innovator All-Star, it's because of you. So thank you, Tom, for that.
Paul, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Season's greetings and happy holidays to your family.
Yes.
Happy New Year, and we can't wait to work with you in 2025.
Can't wait. We're already working with you now. So I can't wait to keep working with you.
Very good point.
I can't wait to keep working with you.
This doesn't feel like work, Paul. This doesn't feel like work.
That's right. That's the funnest part of it.
It isn't work. This is the best. I can't believe you guys get to do this all the time. This is so much fun.
Living the dream.
This
awesome.
This is you are living the dream. We really enjoy our partnership with Device Talks. You guys are fantastic, and not just your events. Obviously, this podcast continues to be an incredibly informative source for this ecosystem. And we just thank you both for all of your hard work in telling these stories. It really makes a difference.
Appreciate
so thank you for that.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, always great to have Paul Grand in the house. Now, let's bring in our keynote conversation. Once again, I spoke with Adrian Mendes. He is Chief Executive Officer of Precision Medical Imaging AI. Prior to joining Precision Medical, he was COO at Grok, which is an AI hardware company. And he's been in the tech industry for his entire career. We'll talk again about that transition to MedTech. Let's go. Thanks again to Precision Medical for sponsoring this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast.
Well, Adrian Mendes, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Tom.
Looking forward to hearing Perimeter's story. It's certainly in an interesting and critical space. But at this point in the podcast, I always ask folks when they first came into MedTech. Yours is a unique situation. I think this is you're a tech guy who's kind of found his way over to the MedTech side of things. What was your path here? Maybe start off first with how you got into technology. What drew you to what you were doing previously, and give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm an engineer by education. I went to the University of Waterloo up in Toronto, outside Toronto, years and years and years ago. And I've worked. You're right. This is this at Perimeter, which I joined about 18 months ago, is my first foray into MedTech. But before that, I worked in electronics, computers, computer chips. Most recently, I spent 5-6 years at an AI hardware startup, which I joined when it was just a small handful of engineers. And when I left, we had grown that business into a few hundred employees. So it's doing very well right now. But what attracted me to this, so I guess, backing up a little bit. So I've been in the AI space for a long time. Mm-hmm. I've certainly been in the hardware space for an even longer time. And when I was introduced to Perimeter, it was extremely interesting to me, putting the medical industry part of it aside, which was new. But the fact that their technology, it had a couple of key ingredients I look for when looking for new companies, right? Does it have something that customers value a lot and they like and they need? And is the market big? Okay, so it is. And that was easy enough to identify pretty early on. And then secondly, how is the business positioned from a technology standpoint, right? Is it really unique? Is it novel? Is it protectable? Is it easy enough to copy when someone else comes in? And this was very attractive to me. So there are two sort of IP, I don't know how I would say it, crown jewels, let's say, in the company. One is the camera that Perimeter has, and the other is the really big image library of all the pictures the camera took. And so when I was first introduced to the company, these two things were very interesting to me in terms of the start of an AI sort of wave, I guess, that we're in.
So you come into this conversation with a unique perspective. We talk to a lot of MedTech folks who have either worked in AI in some capacity, but have always been in the MedTech industry. So I'd love your perspective on, well, first the where we are in the development of AI. You've been in the industry for a while. We clearly have hit some inflection point where even guys like me can use ChatGPT and write a nice little marketing email quickly if they need to. But from your perspective, where are we in the development and the I guess the abilities of AI, and are we at a tipping point where it feels as if it's just going to start finding its way into every single industry. So give me your broader sense of where we are with AI.
Yeah, I think we're still in very early days right now with AI.
That's amazing. It doesn't feel like it.
It doesn't feel like it. But then when you think back to it, ChatGPT is only 2 years old. It was two Novembers ago that the first ChatGPT sort of hit the world, which is incredible because of how much it's moved since those early days. So we're in super early days. I think we're in a phase right now where there is a belief, which I share, that it is going to have a huge impact on industry, on day-to-day people's lives across the board in ways we can't even imagine yet. And we've just touched upon it. And it's really, I'd call it sort of still in the hands of engineers to a first order for how to make it more usable. You made the joke just now that it's finally the stage where you can start to use it. There's so much, it's almost like the first VCR, which you could kind of use, but didn't know how to program the clock.
Right.
It's that sort of thing. There's so much more to go. I think the industry is still looking for a few things. One is, who's the Apple that's going to come out with the product that takes the tech and makes it so easy to use that people don't even know it's tech anymore. It's more of a human aspect to it. So I think there's an aspect of that. There's an area of, and this goes a little bit to my background, hardware development that still is in very early innings. Right from the computer chips up to the data centers, up to the way we power these things, up to just the trade-off between just throwing a whole lot of compute power, including electrical power, at doing AI, where there's tons and tons of room for improvement. And that field is very, very much alive. There's the algorithms that are, continuously changing. Every few months, there's a new way to do a thing that just gives a step function improvement. And then there's the data. And the data collection in the libraries. So I think we're in early innings on all those dimensions. And it's at a point now where even what it will probably do for us isn't even in most people's imaginations yet. Kind of like maybe where the internet was in the mid-90s. You knew it was a big thing, you just didn't know how quite yet.
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting. So we have that overview of AI. Now help me understand sort of how the medical industry, the healthcare industry, is positioned compared to other industries to be transformed by AI? Is it uniquely positioned because it has so much data, because it has so much inefficiency that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for AI? Or is it actually one of the more complex industries where AI is going to really take even a longer time to get in and make some changes?
It's an interesting question. It's one that it's been very near and dear to my heart, I guess, since I've just joined this industry. So I've fresh look, fresh eyes on it, as opposed to having been in it for 20 years. It's a heavily regulated industry, obviously, and it needs to be, which means it adopts new technology more slowly because you don't want to do things that would harm patients. Okay, so that's good. Maybe it's analogous in some way to the autonomous car industry where similar sort of things apply, but it's less regulated over there. So it's certainly behind. I don't think the medical industry is at the cutting edge of technology by any stretch of the imagination. The flip side of that is there is a ton of low-hanging fruit. And that was one of the things actually that interested me to come into this. Why would you go from moving into a regulated industry and where you're trying to be on cutting edge and move really fast, you're being slowed down so much? That's got to be frustrating. And to some extent it is. It's probably the most frustrating thing of moving this industry, just the speed at which you can see there are improvements that are very like low-hanging fruit, but it takes a long time to get things approved. And the regulators are still trying to figure out how to regulate it, and it's moving so fast. So frustration, yes, but huge amounts of improvement, of low-hanging fruit, and the impact is massive, right? If you just think of healthcare, like what's more impactful to people in their day-to-day life. I think one of the more challenging aspects, and more fundamentally, more so than the regulation and whatnot, is that AI can do a really good job. I mean, in generally, software does a good job if it's a repeatable thing. The challenge with healthcare is that every individual is very, very unique. There's no two people that are alike. And so there's a lot of just trying to figure out how do we group people into what seems like similar characteristics and then treat them that way. So that's the tricky thing.
That's interesting.
has the possibility to improve. I look for groupings that we would like. How do we group things now? People now, sex, age, ethnicity. But there might be things that we're not even thinking of that are actually better groupings of people than the way we simplistically think about it. So I think there's so much room for improvement here. So it'll be an interesting journey.
Much steeper learning curve for the artificial intelligence. So much more to learn and so much more variation. You're right. That's a great point. It changes from item to item. You're not going to work on one car and the next car will be exactly the same. It's a completely different problem to solve.
Right.
Interesting challenge. So, did you, prior to taking the perimeter job, did the idea of working in this field, were you excited at that opportunity, at those challenges, and the opportunity to improve healthcare, or was it something that you had to get comfortable with? How did you charge into that situation when you took the job as perimeter CEO?
Yeah, so when I first got introduced to the company, it was exciting for some of the reasons I already stated. Industry that is behind the curve generally versus other industries with a lot of room for improvement. I do believe AI is sort of like a step function. It's an inflection point in what can be done, kind of like the internet, kind of like the PC, kind of like the cell phone. So I believed in that. The apprehension, I did have apprehension, right? MedTech is new. It's a brand new industry. There's a regulator involved, which isn't so much something I've had in my previous career. So that was a learning curve that I knew I'd have to get over. But the opportunity, so there were two things that are interesting to me. One is just the opportunity in the industry as a whole, and two, the unique characteristics of Perimeter, where if the company I was introduced to hadn't been in such a strong position as Perimeter is, it would not have, in my mind, the ROI, I guess, or the risk trade-off would not have been there. But there were such good bones in this company, such good IP. The founder, it's a 10-year-old company. The founders are still at the company, right? It's got all the ingredients if you're going to switch to a new industry, this is the type of company you'd want to be at to experience that new industry. So.
That's great. Well, that's a good lead into to learn about Perimeter and about the company. So, what is Perimeter's mission and goal?
Yeah. So our mission is to eliminate the need for second cancer surgeries. Help surgeons and patients make sure that if they do unfortunately have to go for cancer surgery, it's the one and only one that they would have to have. And that's really our mission, right? That mission helps survival rates. That mission, if achieved, that mission can help reduce, improve survival rates, reduce the emotional trauma of having to go back for a second surgery, improve surgeons. Like no one wants to feel like they have to do the same job twice. So improve surgeons' life and save money ultimately, right? Save money in the whole healthcare system. So that's our mission. That's what we're working to achieve. And I think, with the tech we've had, we're starting to see some really, really bright, possibilities there for that.
How big of a problem is this that you're trying to solve within healthcare? How many women or cancer patients who've had surgery have to go back for another because something was missed?
Surprisingly large. This was one of the big interesting things when I just got into this was, so 1 in 5 women have to go back for a second breast surgery.
Wow.
Because there's cancer left behind. 1 in 5. And there's 250,000 some odd breast cancer surgeries in the U.S.
Wow.
So that's a lot of
50,000 people, 50,000 women a year. What is the gold standard right now for determining whether or not all the cancer has been removed? What is the current process?
Yeah, so the current process, a surgeon does their operation, takes the tumor out, hope they got it all. And then that excised tissue gets sent to pathology. Pathology will, put in formalin, fix it, and then put it under a microscope, and they'll look. And what they're looking for is what is known as the margin. Clear margins, if anyone's been through cancer treatment, clear margins is what they're looking for. What clear margins mean is in the excised tissue that was removed, is there a margin of healthy tissue all the way around the tumor? And that margin ought to be a few millimeters sort of deep, wide, to be assured to, probabilistically assured that you've gotten all the cancer out of the patient. If the margin is 0 or is less than a few millimeters, then there's a higher chance that some cancer cells are left back in the body with all the obvious negative, impact of that. So under the microscope, the pathologist looks at that and then makes an assessment. Is there a wide enough margin of just clean, healthy cells or not? They sample about 2% of the excised tissue, so that's not a lot. But with that information, they send it back to the surgeon, and either it's good, and the margins are clear, or 1 in every 5 women, it's not. And so now you have to think about this, right? This is a week later. This is a week after the operation has completed. That woman's gone home, back in their life, back at work, whatever, with their family, and potentially getting this phone call that says, I'm sorry, from the surgeon, who's also like horrified, right? I'm sorry, I didn't get it all, and you're going to have to come back in for a second surgery. And the cycle starts again. Oh, and by the way, we have to delay any post-operative treatment, radiation or chemo or whatever, until past the second surgery. And, we really hope we get it all in the second surgery, but of course, no promises.
Interesting. And I would think today's with the strain on today's healthcare system, it seems like it takes, I'm sure these are expedited appointments, but may not go in the next day. I don't know. There could be a lag where it extends this uncertainty even longer. Yeah. So what is Perimeter's solution? Talk a bit about your technology.
Yeah, so it starts with I'm going to call it the camera that we have that's able to, it's unique. So it's called OCT, which stands for optical coherence tomography. And essentially the way to think about that is ultrasound. It's just like ultrasound, except it uses infrared light waves instead of sound waves. So you take a tissue, you shine this light on it, the light waves reflect back in a certain way, and then there's sensors that collect all those light waves and create an image on a screen. We've all actually experienced OCT probably when you go to the eye doctor. Almost every optometry office uses OCT to look, to look at your eye. It's a small area, right? Your eyeball is only maybe 1 square centimeter-ish. But for us to use this to look at at these tumors, we had to expand it out to much bigger than 1 centimeter. So what we do is we take that OCT camera, which we've, and that's where some of our IP comes in. We've figured out how to make it take a much bigger picture than the 1 centimeters. And we put that on the screen. Today, we have a product that is FDA cleared, which we've got in operating rooms across the US. We've had about maybe just under 2,000 patients now kind of go through a procedure with that. And those surgeons, they look at it, they look at that image on the screen, and they're trying to identify anything that looks suspicious. And if it looks suspicious, then the surgeon makes a determination. We train them on what they're looking at. Makes a determination of whether that's a clean margin with only healthy cells or there's some cancer cells, and they can take more tissue if that's the conclusion that they come to. The trick with the camera that's different than the other imaging technologies like X-ray and MRI or whatnot is the resolution. So our camera has about a 15 micron resolution. Cells, fat cells are in the tens, 10 micron, maybe 20 micron. Cancer cells are hundreds of microns, maybe 100 micron, 80 micron. None of the other imaging technologies have that level of resolution. So when you're looking at the tumor with X-ray or MRI or ultrasound, you're seeing a really fuzzy thing. Interesting. And when you're trying to get precise, like a millimeter or two, you need not fuzzy, you need high resolution. So that's the base core part of our technology that allows the surgeon to see things at the cellular level.
And how many systems did you say you have out there?
We've got a few dozen systems out in the field right now, and we've had about just under 2,000 patients that have gone through. I'll call it on the commercial side of the business with the S series, which is our FDA cleared device.
So the S series, this system is in the operating room. So the tissue is analyzed then and there during the procedure. What does that look like? Is the tissue? I've seen pictures of it, and folks can check out perimetermed.com for more information about the system. But so it's a console. I see a big screen. Is the tissue just put down in the center there, and it's sort of examined there? Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty much. So think it's almost like think of a stand-up desk but smaller, and then there's a monitor right in front of you. And on the top of the desk is a circular piece of glass. The camera is underneath the glass, pointed up towards the sky. And so the surgeon takes the tumor out. It gets placed into what we call an immobilizer. It's basically a container with glass on the bottom of it. And then that container gets placed on top of the machine, on top of that glass circle on the top of the machine. And then from the bottom, the camera takes the picture. It scans through and recreates the picture, or creates a picture, I guess, up on the screen. The container, the consumable immobilizer, is a one-time use because it touches tissue, of course. And so after the surgeon uses it for that one patient, that gets thrown out. But then the tissue gets sent down to pathology, and then finally pathology looks at it to make the final. That's the gold standard, right? So pathology has to look at it to make the final call on the tissue. And so our goal with this is to help the surgeon have confidence that by the time they leave that operating room after that first surgery, that they really did get it all, and that, hopefully less than 1 in 5 chance of the pathologist coming back a week later saying you missed some.
So your system right now is used sort of as a first pass to give the surgeon a bit of certainty, but the pathology report is still the final clear or no clear.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that's the standard of care. That's kind of what's required to have the pathologist look at it at the very, very end of the line.
So the systems you have in the OR now, those rely entirely upon the surgeon's ability to see the margins. They don't have an AI functionality. Your current system out there does not have AI at the moment, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So this is the news. Then we're going to move into your B series, which you had some news recently regarding your hopes to get a PMA approval for the B series. Talk about the B series a bit and what functionality, if that were to be approved, that could bring to this process.
Yeah. Okay. So this is exciting for us. So we just a few weeks ago wrapped up our clinical trial that we have had in progress for the last little while on the B series. The B series is very similar to the S series, except there's an AI layer placed on top of it. So we have an image library. Remember I was talking about the 2 crown jewels. Crown jewel number 2 is the image library, over 2 million images in that library, which we've trained an algorithm to identify and look for suspicious features that could be indicative of breast cancer. Okay, so we've trained an algorithm for that, and the trial was the clinical trial with the B series device was taking that same basic platform, putting the AI image recognition algorithm on top of it. And what that gives the surgeon, so it gives us a couple things. It gives multiple people a couple things, different things. What it gives a surgeon is the ability to have highlighted to them what the algorithm thinks is the most likely, the most suspicious, likely chance of being suspicious features inside the images. So rather than the surgeon having to search through thousands of images, which they can do relatively quickly on the S series, but still they have to do it manually. With the next gen, the hope is that the AI will be able to correctly identify those images that have the suspicious feature in them, which will speed up the workflow and give the surgeon more confidence, as they go through their procedure. Okay, that's what it does for a surgeon that, from the surgeon's perspective. What it does from the company's perspective is if you think about new users or users on a new technology falling on the spectrum of early adopters to late adopters, it allows us to really expand our addressable market from really the early adopters for our OCT product all the way through the middle and late adopters who want them. I mean, every surgeon would like to have an improvement in their positive margin, identification. But it gives them the comfort and the confidence and the willingness to then make the leap and use a tech like this because they have this co-pilot AI system, to whatever you want to call it there, right? So if the trial is successful, we did get top-line results already that shows that we have met our primary endpoint, so that's great. That'll all get packaged up and go to the FDA in the next few months. Assuming we get approved, whatever time frame it takes to get the PMA approval, then that's what we do as a company. We start to take that out and really expand our customer base more broadly than we can with the S series.
So what is I know it's the FDA and you can never really predict when things will come through, but do you have a sense of when you may hear a definitive word? I mean, they have processed some AI. They've approved some AI products in the past for ophthalmology and others. Would this be the first one in breast cancer?
Yes. Assuming this one, when this one hits the market, gets approved, and it's all authorized, it will be the first AI in breast cancer surgery product on the market. So, that's.
Do you have a sense of when you may hear one way or the other? And no is a completely acceptable answer.
Well, the plan is to submit our package.
Yeah.
We're still in the process of analyzing the data, right? So,
okay.
But submit the package to the FDA early next year. And then it's a little bit of wait and see. Typical timelines are about a year, about 12 months. We have something called breakthrough device designation from the FDA, which does help speed things along a little bit. Through that designation, we can do these things called sprint conversations with the FDA, which we have been taking advantage of to help. We can ask them different questions. They can give us their thought process on different things. So we've been fairly closely engaged with the review team at the FDA over the past months. And so, although we don't know, we can't really guarantee anything. We hope we've got a good relationship. We hope we've done a good job explaining to them how the trial, is supposed to turn out. We had their approval on the trial design going into it, so they don't have to figure out whether this trial is designed correctly or not. So, we're planning around 12 months and hoping for something shorter than that.
If you were to get that approval, what would it take to displace pathology as a gold standard? That I imagine would involve physicians and hospitals obviously would have to adopt that, but what would give them the assurance that that AI and what you're doing is able to perform the same task as the pathology, or is that not even part of the strategy? Your goal is just to provide that early bit of affirmation for the surgeon and of course for the patient.
Yeah, it's not part of our strategy to displace the pathologist. I think that's still, for the foreseeable future, that's going to be the gold standard. That'll give the reassurance to the patient and the surgeon that really, it was a successful surgery. So our goal is not at all to displace the pathologist. The goal is to reduce the number of re-excisions that need to happen, re-operations that need to happen. In fact, with the pathologist, we actually think we can bring value to them. In this way, if the surgeon has already taken pictures of the entire specimen in the operating room, those pictures potentially have value to the pathologist because if they were to have those pictures in the lab, so pathology right now samples looks at maybe 2% of the volume under the microscope, right? So they have to use their information, the information from the surgeon, whatever imaging they have to be able to figure out which is the right 2% of that sample to look at under the microscope. If we can provide them more imaging that's valuable to them, where they do take their samples, on the areas they believe to have the most likelihood of something, being in the margin, that's a value to them. That should increase their hit rates of being able to look at precisely what needs to be looked at. And so, I think there's extensibility for this tech, even to the pathologist to help them. And that's really where we'd be pushing much more than, displacing them. That's not really part of the roadmap. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of your current system? How many of the samples that have undergone analysis on your system has a surgeon seen something else that needed to be removed and had to go back? Is it catching that 20%?
Yeah. The answer is yes. We have a lot of data. A lot of it's in the process of being written up and published as we speak. But we did publish a white paper earlier this year from one of our surgeons in outside Dallas, where her re-excision rate with the machine was down in the around 5% range. So we are seeing a pretty good improvement on that, and the data is coming out, as we get it published. So we're optimistic. I mean, more than optimistic, I guess, that this does have the intended impact. So now it becomes a matter of, how do we scale it, right? How do we really scale this up to far more physicians than that have it right now? And so this is why completing this trial, getting a positive top line result, and then being able to bring that, the the image recognition algorithms into the marketplace, I think really does give us an inflection point to get this into many more patients, procedures, and then many more surgeons' hands.
That's great. And finally, what is the plan for a sales rollout? Is this a device that you sell? Is it a device that is given to the hospital and there's a service charge involved? What's the commercial rollout plan for the next series?
So for the B series, I think there's, and to some extent a little bit for the S series as well, and how we're monetized right now. There's three components to it. One is the device itself, the stand-up desk thing, the cart. 2 is that immobilizer container I described, and then 3, when it comes on the B series, will be the algorithm. And they can each be monetized in different manners, depending again with the personality of the customer. Right? Some customers can absorb a CapEx cost up front and prefer a lower OpEx consumable price. Some customers can't absorb the CapEx, who would rather pay a higher consumable price than a lower one plus a CapEx. And then when we do get to the point where we have the algorithms available, then you enter a very interesting place where the algorithms are continuously getting better as you train them more with more data. And so then there's the opportunity for potentially a subscription model, where if you subscribe to this monthly or yearly or whatever fee, we will ensure that the best, most up-to-date models we have that have been, verified and validated and, meet the right standards are being pushed out to your machine for your surgeon. So these are the 3 monetization sort of models that we, 2 of them are in place right now, and 1 will come online once we get AI out there.
And final question. I mean, you're in San Francisco, in the tech capital of the world. I'm sure you still have a lot of friends and folks you hang out with in that part of the world who aren't part of MedTech. What do they ask? What kind of questions do they ask you? And what do you tell them about your move into this, I think, very rewarding sector, but certainly one with unique challenges? What kind of message do you give them, or what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about a similar move that you made 18 months ago?
Yeah, there's a couple things I say. One is it's a lot easier to explain to my friends and family what I work on these days. It was much harder back when I was working on computer chips and servers and things like that, clouds.
That's funny.
So that's probably the number one thing. But for people looking to get into MedTech but coming from a background similar as mine, I guess what I would say to them is it's a little bit greenfield, right? The MedTech industry for AI. So if would you rather be the 10,000th person to enter a field, or in the first 1,000 or 500 people to enter a field, and it's going to be impactful, and healthcare is not going anywhere. And so if that is more, where you're thinking, then maybe this is something to look at, where the impact of what you have is, you're earlier on. So you have the opportunity to kind of mold the way the industry goes a little bit more, perhaps, in the MedTech field, especially if you're in AI. I think that can be important to a certain class of people. And then, of course, the most obvious one, right? Working on healthcare, working on cancer, has a whole aspect of meaningfulness, perhaps, or maybe it's easier. I don't want to downplay the other work, the work that I've done in the past and what other people do, but it's easier to connect the dots on how it directly impacts grandma, working in health tech, versus how it directly impacts grandma working on some other types of technologies. So I think that's another thing that's really, some people have it in them and they just want to do that. I mean, come on in, the water's warm.
And final question, actually, because it just occurred to me. So we didn't really discuss the origin of the technology. I mean, you're at a hopefully a pivotal point where if you were to secure the PMA approval, you'd be in a position to move forward and turn someone's dream into a reality. What you joined a little less than 2 years ago, but just talk for a moment, if you would, about the origin of the technology. Where did it come from, and has this always been the goal? Is it followed a path to here, or as far as you know, have there been some pivots and some reconsiderations of where they started?
Yeah, not so much pivots, but the company was founded 10 years ago, and it was founded on the OCT imaging technology. And so there was a theory at the time that, hey, the resolution of this type of imaging is really, really high, could be used for margin assessment. And And so maybe this is a good place to look at, right? So a lot of research put into how to build a camera, how to make the camera take good pictures of the tissue, right? So really everything that led up to the S series. Well, somewhere in the last 10 years, AI started to get traction from an image recognition standpoint. And then there was a realization, well, we've got this great image library, and really the work that the surgeon needs to do is look at all these images and identify something. What if we could create an algorithm that could help them with that? So the original technology was created up in Toronto, and that's still where most of our technical team is working on the hardware and the software. These algorithms were really, there were a few earlier attempts at it, but really the team we have right now is the guy who's leading is down in Houston. And he's got engineers sort of scattered throughout the US and a little bit in Canada as well. And so that team collectively started working on it after the company was founded. And that's the closest thing. It's not a pivot, really. It's just an enhancement to the basic product.
Sure.
But that's really where the two technology sort of centers, I guess, are.
So there must be a lot of excitement that you're getting closer, again, without getting overconfident, that you're getting closer to your goal.
Yes, it's getting through the trial was a big deal, like from a morale standpoint for the company, because some of these folks, I said the founders sold the company 10 years, right? So 10 years and being able to see, having a successful trial before you have it is a huge risk item. But once you have that positive, result for the top line endpoint, primary endpoint, it's a huge de-risking of the business after that point. So this is why internally the team was just so excited over the past month when we were able to take that risk off the table. And so now we move really into the mode of how do we scale this business? How do we make sure we're successful with the FDA submission? And how do we get the word out there and really get into as many surgeons' hands as possible?
And I don't normally get into a fourth final question, but every answer you're giving me some other crumb to nibble on. Future for financing and things, if to ultimately pay for whatever you'd like to do. You're publicly traded. How do you see yourself moving forward financially?
Yeah, so we're always very cognizant of our burn rate and runway and things like that. So we continue to manage that. Our revenue's growing. And so sort of our gross margin profit dollars continue to grow and contribute. So our goal this year is to continue to increase that revenue, even on the S series in advance of the B series coming out. At some point in time, we will want to fundraise to be able to fund growth, right? So, and we do need to build, we have a small sales force right now. We'll want to grow that sales force. So, you can foresee sort of over the next, in the coming year that we'll start to do some fundraising and bring some more capital on the books.
Excellent. All right. Well, it's a great MedTech story. It's great to have you as part of the industry, Adrian, and thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Appreciate it.
All right, well, that is a wrap. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly Podcast. As always, we encourage you to subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network so you don't miss a future episode of this or our other great podcasts. We have 2 more podcasts coming out in 2024. We'll be hitting you with an Abbott Talks early next week. And then after that, we'll have our final DeviceTalks Weekly of 2024. So don't miss those great episodes. I've got some fantastic medical device leaders coming your way. As always, please connect with us on LinkedIn. Connect with me, Tom Salemi. Connect with Chris Newmarker of the famed Newmarker's Newsmakers, and of course, Kayleen Brown, our Device Talks managing editor. We'll have the whole MassDevice and MDO editorial squad on the podcast next week. It's going to be a doozy and a very big CEO. And I'm excited to end on such a strong note. So other than that, Device Talks Boston, April 30th, May 1st, registration is open. And again, Device Talks Minnesota, June 11th, registration is open. We have no more Device Talks Tuesdays for 2024, but we'll definitely be back in 2025. In fact, we're nearly sold out. We only have a couple left. So if you're interested in being a sponsor of a Device Talks Tuesday, don't sleep on this. Reach out to us right away because those will be gone by the end of next week or this week or whenever you're listening to it. I'm recording this on Friday. All right, folks. Thanks as always for being part of Device Talks and for listening to this silly podcast. and we'll give you another one in just 7 days. Coming to you this Friday with the last Device Talks Weekly of 2024. Thanks, everybody.